think about mostly? You may ever ask you that question before. What do you think about mostly? What do you think about mostly? I'll just put you on the spot.
Lots of things.
Lots of things.
Yeah.
Mine.
Yeah.
Mine. You know what mine does.
Yeah.
Mine's just.
Yeah, mine too. Things
Yeah.
that I need to get done and
Okay.
I can't get done.
Yeah.
Or things I've got to do.
Yeah.
Articles I've got to get written, and I've got a deadline coming up, and so it's just always going.
It's always good. Who in here doesn't really just think a lot? That would be a lie.
No need to.
I believe that. Did you get him what you got me? Because he needs one, and we could wear it the same night. Inside joke, by the way. She can tell you later. But you need it. Oh, and let me clarify something, because as we're talking about thinking, the way my brain works, the way that my brain works, I can dial in on something, and then before you know it, I'm on something else. What do they call that? ADHD? I probably had that. Scatterbrain. There you go. That's originally what ADHD really is. Scatterbrain, right?
No.
It's not. Uh-oh.
ADHD is the inability to concentrate on one thing.
Oh, okay.
But
what's the ability to concentrate on a lot of things at one time? Multitasker. Okay. All right. So let me clarify something. I made the comment. I was making a comment. Matt responded to the comment about at Ladd's, and I said, if you saw me at Ladd's, you saw me carrying 2 purses because of Jamie's neck, and I think I may have made you think that she had just had neck surgery. She has neck problems. She had neck surgery 3 years ago, but she still has some neck problems. So her purse weighs so much, I carry it for her. And
you carry it with your purse?
That'd be Barbara's purse, my mother-in-law, Granny's purse. So they were looking at some dresses and some stuff, and so I just carry their purses. I don't know why I was making that comment, but anyway.
To clarify something.
I was clarifying that Jamie doesn't have, Jamie did not just have neck surgery, she had it 3 years ago. Yeah, so anyway. What do you think about now that you're retired?
I enjoy not having to work and think about what my boss wants me to think about.
Yeah.
At the specific time he wants me to think about it.
You probably think more about the matters of here, don't you? I knew that. Zach, what do you think a lot about?
My family.
Yeah. Now, I'm not talking about worry, and I'm not talking about anything other than just things that go through your mind. Marguerite, what do you think about?
I think about, I'm 78 years old, fixing to be, and I've got to make sure that my mind stays here.
Yeah.
Not here, but here.
That's a good point. That's what we're talking about tonight. Now, there's a couple of different compartments that I want you to think about tonight. Okay. The center hub of our actions and the results of our actions, the very center hub of that, of the things that we do, the things that we are, the things that we want to do, all start right here with a thought. They do. We're going to discuss that tonight, how important that the mind is. If we can get this right here, the mind, the heart, everything will fall right into place. Does that make sense? With our mind, we can create a lot of problems for ourselves. But also with our mind, we can get our heart centered in the right place so that we can be in heaven with the Lord. The mind is a very, very powerful thing to waste, isn't it? But it's also something that when you're dealing with a problem and you got an issue, the mind can play what on you? Tricks. The mind can play tricks on you. So you are a result of the things that you think about. Now, I want you to think tonight, if you're not married, I want you to think about some people that maybe you can change your thought process about. You made captain? I didn't know you were a captain. Fantastic. See how my mind works? This shirt says captain. You did a great job tonight. You had me thinking about some things. The things that you watch, the things that you listen to are critical to your actions. The people that you listen to are critical to your actions. Listen, if you get in the wrong crowd somewhere and you begin to listen to other people's misery loves company, right? So we have to be very careful who and what we listen to. So when you think about your spouse, what do you think about? If you're married in here, when you think about your spouse, their name comes up. What do you think about?
I bet he didn't do what I asked him.
I bet he didn't do what I asked him to do. That's great.
Adam, ask him what he said.
What'd you say?
What's for supper?
What's for supper? What do you think about when you think about your spouse? You ever thought about that before? What do you think about when you think about a person who may have wronged you? What do you think about? What do you think about a person that you know that you need to go and see them? You know you need to go see them. And you know that you need to go study with them about the gospel. I want you tonight to really wrap your mind around some things. The mind, the way that we think about others, is a matter of the heart. So I want you to look at Philippians chapter 4. We're going to read some stuff tonight about how powerful the mind is, the way that we think about others, the way that we love others, the way that we don't love others. Maybe the atmosphere in our home, what we think about. Tell me something that you want when you get home, besides food. What do you want? Philippians 4. What do you want when you get home? Just be honest.
What happened today?
What?
What happened today?
What happened today? We'll talk about it, right? When you get home. What'd you say?
Peace.
Dude, that is exactly where we're going. Peace. Having a house of peace. Always. That is so important. We're going to talk about that. That is good. I'm glad you said that. Philippians 4. And I want us to look at what Paul was talking about here when he was writing to this church. Now, verse 4, rejoice in the Lord when?
Always.
All right. Even when it's difficult, right? Even when it's hard. Even when you've had a bad day. Even when you've got these major problems knocking at the door. Rejoice always. And again, I say what? Rejoice. All right. Now, I want you to look deeply right here at verse 5. It's going to get really deep. Let your gentleness be made known to just the people that you really, really care about and love. Is that right?
No, it says
Who?
all men.
All men. Why?
Because
Why?
the Lord's near.
Because the Lord's near. Hey, listen. Think about when I am dealing with a situation and I'm dealing with a problem and I'm dealing with my spouse at home, the way that I think about is knocking on the door with the way that I'm going to act, the way that I'm going to respond. And the way that I need to respond because the Lord is near. God is near. Now keep that in mind. Now watch where we're going to go with this. This is so good. And then he says, I want you to be anxious for nothing. Don't worry about anything. But in everything, by prayer and by supplication. What is supplication? What does that word supplication mean?
Asking.
It means asking. He said, so in everything, by prayer and asking with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, he says, is going to do two things in your life. Paul says the peace of God does these two things. Number one, that peace is going to surpass every single bit of understanding. So how does that work? How does that work? What kind of peace is he talking about? It surpasses. What's that word surpass mean? It goes far beyond what you ever can imagine. It goes above and beyond. What else does surpass mean? What else does that word mean? Surpass. When you think about it, surpasses. It exceeds. It exceeds. Look what he says, which surpasses all understanding, and it will guard your heart. And what? What does it do? It guards your mind. How important is it that you guard your mind? What can your mind, you know what Satan does? He gets you working on a little something, and he gets you working on it. And what's he do to your mind? Man, he can put your mind so far out there, you'll have everybody in the church against you. You'll have your marriage wrecked like this. You'll have the end of the world coming like this. But here's what peace does. Peace, it passes every level of understanding. You can't even make sense of it. It's so good. And then it guards your mind and your heart. Now, he's talking about, like, think about a military person guarding. How many of y'all go through the Redstone Arsenal every day? Man, what do you pass, Zach, when you go through Redstone Arsenal? What do you pass? Those gates.
Yeah.
Think about that. The peace of God builds this hedge around you, and it guards your mind. But what are you putting in your mind? What are you thinking about? Do you know that something could not be true, but you play it over in your mind over and over and over, and what does it become? It becomes real. It becomes reality. And life is really, when you think about these problems that you have, it's really 90% of what? Is it 90% actual? No, it's not at all. Think about it like this. Sometimes we build these problems up so much so that before you know it, the devil have us believing it. And it's where? It's just right here in your mind. He says this is what peace does. So you got to have peace when you think about peace. He says, finally, brethren, verse 8, he says, I want you to do 6 things. This is what I want you to do. Now look at how powerful this is. Because the mind, think about the mind being a battle zone. When you start thinking bad of somebody else and it goes unchecked, what happens? What's the end result of that? You start treating them bad, right? Your actions start treating, it starts following what's right here. And let me give you an example. How many of y'all in here like music? How many of you in here, if you're riding in the car, you're listening to music? Dale, what do you listen to? What kind of rap songs do you listen to?
Exactly.
What do you listen to?
Country.
Country. All right, Sam, what do you listen to? 80s?
Very broad.
Def Leppard?
Oh, Boston.
Metallica? Boston? Yeah, I like Boston. I'm a Michael McDonald fan. I like Michael McDonald.
Alabama.
Alabama? Who's that?
The Alabama.
Oh! Alabama. Jason, what do you listen to? You listen to
Country music.
who?
Country music.
Oh, I thought you said biker music. I never heard of biker music. Country music. What you listen to and what you watch shapes the way that you act. Did you know that? Look at our society.
If you look at TV and what they're pushing on us with the sitcoms and the different programs,
Desensitizes us.
it all becomes okay to be. It becomes okay to be what the world thinks is okay now.
Has a powerful presence on us, right? So what are we putting in? What are we putting in? Watch what he says. He says, I want you to understand and I want you to see these things. Finally, brethren, I want you to meditate. I want you to think about these things. So number one, he says, I want you to think on things that are true. Now, if you're having a problem and you're really in it, and you know what you're in it about. I've been helping a brother who has got a problem. It's not anything he's created, but he is in agony. He's in agony. He's agonizing over this problem right now. Okay, so he calls me up and I said, "Have you ever read this before?" He said, "I've read it, but I don't really look at it." Finally, brethren, whatever things are true. So the first thing you need to ask is it true? Whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of a good report, if there's any virtue, and if there's anything praiseworthy, here's what you do. You think on this. That's what you think about. Now, that's got to require you to do some things. In order to think this way, what have we got to do? What do you got to do? You got to cut some stuff off, don't you? How about we cut the phone off? How about we cut the TV off? How about we cut music off? You know, you think music ain't really that big of a deal, but it is. The girls were singing a song when they were little. They was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And I couldn't believe what they were singing. So what I did is I just Googled the lyrics out and I gave it to them and I said, okay, now read it to me. Read me what you just sang. They were blown away. They couldn't believe it. So we had this little thing in our house. If you can't say it, then you can't sing it. Does that make sense? It shapes you. It molds you. Every single bit of it does because you believe it, right? All right, so what we want to try to do is we want to try to go above and beyond that. Here's the reason why, verse 9. The things which you learned, in which you received, and you heard, and you saw in me, these do. And here's the reason you do it. Why? Because the God of peace is what? He's with you. Now, how does that make sense to us? Think about Joseph. Every single place that this guy went and bad things happened around him that he didn't cause, who was with him? God. Joseph found peace in the middle of all of these tribulations that he fell under. I mean, you really thought, at what point in time are things going to turn around from Joseph? I mean, he's living right, isn't he? He's doing the right things right. And how discouraging is it when you do the right thing, but yet you're persecuted for that? So you find yourself, Paul says, listen, there are going to be bad things happen to us. You're going to go through pain, and you're going to go through suffering. And as a matter of fact, you will probably, at some point in your life, and at some point in time in your life, you will fall into agony. But he said, these are the things that you think on. It all starts right here. Your actions follow the way that you think. And I've got to ask myself, is this really bad? Maybe I need to change the way that I think about this, because my actions will follow the things I think. And then, you know what comes behind actions? Results. We sometimes look up and wonder, how did I find myself there? Well, it started thinking. I started thinking the wrong way. So number one, our right thinking, right actions will be produced by right thinking. Change the way I think. And that starts with the way that I think about myself. It starts with the way that I think about my wife, the way that I think about my children, the way that I think about my fellow brethren in the Lord's church, maybe the way that I think about how I need to learn to handle some things in my life. If I want great results, I got to start right here. Let's look at another verse. Anybody got anything they want to add to that? Am I missing something there? Wanda, what do you think about this? Look at the last verse. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do. And the God of peace will be with you. What do you think about that? The God of peace.
Well, if we go back up to the verses ahead of it, if we do those things, we've heard them and we've received them, and then we need to learn them.
Yeah.
And so when we go through those processes of doing that, then it says do. So
Action.
that is the results in the action and everything, and then that puts that not only the peace of God, but the God of peace is with us.
Did you hear what she said? Not only the peace of God is with us, but the God of peace is with us. You think God wants us to live in peace? Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Has everything to do with what we think and we meditate on. The thought process and placing that into action. Peace that is given by God, and it's from God. So do you have a house of peace? Are you creating peace in your house? Are you a peacemaker? What's a peacemaker? What is a peacemaker? The person that makes peace. Wherever they go, they want to see a situation be peaceful. How many of you have ever been involved in a church split? You ever been involved in a split in a congregation? I went through one at a very young age. I was 19 years old. I was stationed in the Air Force Special Ops Command at Hurlburt Field, and I wasn't living right. I wasn't. My mind was messed up. I was thinking the wrong way. And what I thought is the proper way to live as a Christian was to go to church and to be there every time the door was open. See, I was thinking the wrong way, right? So what I did is I checked off the box that I went. And that made me feel good. And then I went and did what I wanted to do and live. But I thought, hey, because I'm going to church, I'm okay. But something good came out of that, because one Wednesday night, this congregation, the Fort Walton Beach Church of Christ, was going through a split. And I really didn't know what was going on, but they were bickering at worship on a Wednesday night. Instead of having class, they just had this big open forum in the auditorium, and anybody wanted to say something, get up and say something. And I'll never forget sitting there, and this older black man who was a full bird colonel in the Air Force, he got up and he talked about love and thinking the best of others, whether you believed it or not. I'm just going to think the best of you anyway. I'm going to think my way into a better way of feeling. He said that. I couldn't believe it. At 19 years old, it stuck with me. You ain't going to believe this when I tell you this. Jamie and the girls and I went to a congregation. Campbell was with us. It was 2 years ago in Panama City, and I saw him. He was like 80 years old. He looked great. And it wasn't that same congregation. This congregation was 100 miles away from Fort Walton. It was on the other side of Panama City. And I knew immediately when I saw him, it was him. I saw him in the parking lot. Isn't that amazing? Here I was, 49 years old, and this was when I was 19. It was 30 years ago, and he was 50 at the time. And I went up to him, and you know what I did. I hugged him, and I said, you don't remember me, and I haven't seen you in 30 years, but this is what you said, and this is what stuck with me. And his eyes filled with tears, and he couldn't believe it. That happened. That's a true story. He helped me understand, put a seed in my life about the way to think about people. It was a remarkable moment in my life, but I'll never forget that. So no matter what we're going through, no matter where you are, or if there's a situation that you're dealing with at work, you're in a negative environment, you seek to think best of people and be a maker of peace. You bring peace to a situation, and God will bless it. Big time. So think about that. Am I thinking about being a peacemaker? As an elder, and you've experienced problems in the church. We all know if you're going to be an elder, you're going to experience that. Sam, you've been an elder, correct? And you've dealt with people where there's not peace. How important is it that a member come to you and say, brother, what can I do to bring peace to this situation? How important is that?
It helps a lot. From time to time, there are people who want things to go their way, even when the elders think it would be best to go a different way. And sometimes they'll try to rally support for their position.
Yeah. Then you got two different teams.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got problems. You guys have been a part of that in congregations before. Peace is so important. Are you thinking about being a peacemaker? Okay, flip back to Philippians chapter 2. I want you to look at this. Paul doesn't stop there. He's going to talk about Philippians 2, 1 through 5. He's going to talk about unity through humility. Therefore, if there's any consolation, what does the word consolation mean?
Encouragement.
Encouragement. Therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like what? Minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through selfish ambition or conceit, that means arrogance, but in the lowliness of what? Mind. In the lowliness of, where does humility start? Look right here. Where does it start? It starts in my mind. He said, you let the lowliness of mind, let each one esteem others better than himself. Let each of you look out not only for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. What's the point here? humility, and all of these wonderful attributes that he's talking about that begin with unity, it starts right here. It starts in my mind. I cannot feel my way into a better way of thinking. I have to think my way into a better way of feeling. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on this passage? Christian, what are you thinking right now?
I was just thinking in Romans 12, verse 2.
Read it.
Hold on just a
Read, but when you read Romans 12, read 1 and 2, okay? Romans, let's turn over there. Romans chapter 12, it's really important we read that first verse too. Romans 12. You want to read it or you want me to read it?
Well, I thought I had a English version in my Apple, but I don't. So,
You want me to read it?
yes, please.
Okay. I beseech you, therefore. What's the word beseech mean? What? Beg. You said something else. Somebody said beg, somebody said something else. Urge. I urge you, I plead you, therefore, brethren. Who's he talking to? By the mercy of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service, and do not be conformed to what?
This world.
But be transformed by the renewing of what?
Of your mind.
You want to start over new. Well, you got to reprogram. What do you got to reset? The mind. Now, when he's talking about the mind, he's talking about the heart, right?
That's right.
Okay, it all starts right here, the mind and the heart, your spirit. You want to fix things, you got to hit the reset button. You got to renew this. When does and how does this happen? When should it happen? Every day. Every day. You told me something about Howard that he would get up. You remember telling me this? He'd get up today and every day he'd say what?
You see, it's the devil sitting there waiting on us, but the Lord's in control.
The Lord's in control. He'd say that every day, wouldn't he? Think about this, y'all, for just a minute. He said, I beg you, I plead with you, don't be conformed to the world. Don't go along with the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and the perfect will of God. Look, when you're transformed in Christ, then something powerful happens. You begin to love what you ought to do. You begin to love to do it. You begin to love to look at yourself in the mirror and to invite discipline in your life. You accept it. You ask God for it. When you're thinking the right way, your actions are following and you'll have great results. But you've got to renew this every day. You've got to be open. You've got to be honest. You've got to be transparent where God can see through you. And you've got to be humble. And without those things, you can't renew your mind. Why do you think it's important to renew our mind? Why do you think it's important to do that?
Because probably you won't be happy.
Yeah, you aren't going to be happy. You're going to be miserable.
But what we're talking right now is very important in our lives as Christians, but also as human beings. It sounds like an easy thing, but it's not. Because I truly believe that in order to change your mind, you probably need to go back to your childhood. The way we act as an adult is what we were when we were a child. And probably we don't know it, but all of us have wounds.
Yeah.
Childhood wounds.
That's a great point.
That we have to heal first.
Yeah.
So in order to love my neighbor, I have to love myself first. And sometimes we don't have that.
Yeah. And to add to that, sometimes we can become a victim, can't we? Very difficult to renew your mind if you play the victim role. It's difficult. Great point. 1 Timothy 4. We got time for a couple more verses. Let's look at this. You know, I know that I'm telling you things that you already know. It sure is good for us to remember these things and be reminded of them, isn't it? We need to renew our mind daily. 1 Timothy 4, I want you to look at verse 12. You can stop me anytime. Paul's talking to a very young man who has a very large task ahead of him. He doesn't have a lot of people around him to help him. So Paul's encouraging through this letter. He's going to deal with apostasy. He's going to talk to him about being a servant of Jesus Christ. And then he's going to talk to him about really doing something important, and that's to get control of his ministry. Okay? Now watch what he says. He says, let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers. Okay, 6 things he says that you need to do right now as a Christian. Now, if you want to know what living the Christian life is about, Paul tells Timothy, there's 6 things that I want you to do. So get up every day. He said, I want you to be an example to other believers in the Word. And what that means is that you live by the Word. Now, if you and I are talking about things and we're in a Bible study, guess what? My opinion doesn't matter. Neither does yours. What matters is what this says. So he says, look, you keep your opinion out of it. You be an example to believers in the Word. Number 2, in your behavior or your conduct. Number 3, in love. Number 4, in the Spirit. Number 5, in faith. And then the last thing is in purity. He said, till I come, give attention to doing 3 things. You give attention to reading. What happens when you read God's Word? What happens to your mind? What happens to your mind? Renewal. He said to exhortation, to encouraging, lifting people up, and then to the doctrine. He said, don't neglect the gift that's in you, which was given to you by prophecy with the laying on the hands of the eldership. Number 15, circle this. Meditate on these things. Look, you want to fix things in your life? He said, think about these things. It blows my mind. I used to think, I have all these problems, all these issues, Steve. I have all these problems and all these issues. And somebody sat down with me and they said, what are you thinking about? And I told them what I'm thinking about. I said, why aren't you thinking about this? Well, you can't think about this if you're what? If you're not in this. You can't think about it because you're not in it. So look what he said. He said, meditate, think about these things, give yourself entirely to them, that your progress may be evident to all. He said, take heed to yourself and to the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this, this is the whole purpose that you do this. The entire purpose that you do it. You will save both yourself and those who hear you. How important is your influence at SJ&L to him? Extremely. How important is his influence to you? Very important. Why? Because you have an opportunity to save somebody by your conduct, by your example, by the way that you think, by the way that you act, by the way you study. There's somebody in this room right now. You don't know who they are, but I do, and they know too. I wouldn't be teaching this if it wasn't for them. Their influence is so important in my life because they do these things. The people that you hang out with are the people that you'll be like. The people that you listen to, you take on their form of identity. So think about that. Why is the class over that quick? All right. We're going to get into some other good stuff here in the next week. Next week is really important. I hope that you'll be here because next week we're going to talk about how we measure other people, how we judge other people. We're going to talk about how important it is that you be very, very careful what you're measuring in the home and how you're measuring it and how often you're measuring it. So don't miss next week. Thank y'all for being here. Dusty, you did a beautiful job tonight. Thank you.